The Roman world was crumbling, but one man stood between civilization and chaos: Flavius Aetius. Born into a time of war, betrayal, and shifting alliances, he would become Rome's last great defender. But to save an empire, he would have to master its enemies first. Aetius was not raised in the safety of Roman palaces, but among the very people who would one day try to tear Rome apart. As a hostage in the courts of the Visigoths and later the Huns, he learned their ways, their tactics, and their weaknesses. By the time he returned to Rome, he understood the barbarian mind better than any Roman general before him. The Western Roman Empire was gasping for breath, struggling against internal decay and external threats. The Vandals had seized North Africa, the Visigoths controlled Spain, and the Huns, under the ruthless Attila, were growing stronger. If Rome was to survive, it needed a leader who understood war better than politics. Aetius rose through the ranks, proving himself in battle after battle. He fought the Franks, crushed a rebellion in Gaul, and played rival barbarian factions against each other. He wielded diplomacy like a sword, making allies out of former enemies and securing Rome's fragile borders. Before they became bitter enemies, Aetius used his connection with the Huns to serve his own ends. He hired them as mercenaries to fight his rivals, wielding them as a weapon against Rome's enemies. But he knew that Rome could never truly coexist with the Huns. One day, they would come for the empire itself. Aetius had powerful enemies in Rome, especially Boniface, a rival general. Their conflict erupted into civil war, leaving the empire even weaker. Though Aetius eventually emerged victorious, Rome had lost valuable resources in the infighting, resources it would soon desperately need. In the east, Attila the Hun had become the most feared warlord in the world. His warriors razed cities, crushed armies, and demanded tribute from terrified rulers. And soon, he turned his gaze toward the Western Roman Empire. In 451 AD, Attila led a massive army into Gaul, modern France, burning everything in his path. Rome's forces were outnumbered, and few believed the empire had the strength to stop the Huns. But Aetius knew that if Rome fell in Gaul, there would be nothing left to protect Italy. Aetius could not defeat Attila alone, so he did something no Roman general had done before. He forged an alliance with Rome's former enemies. Visigoths, Franks, and Burgundians answered his call, putting aside their hatred of Rome to stop a greater threat. It was a gamble, but it was the only way to stand against the unstoppable Huns. The fate of Western civilization was decided on a vast battlefield in Gaul. The Roman Visigothic alliance faced Attila's unstoppable horde in a brutal clash. Tens of thousands died in a single day. The earth itself was said to be soaked in blood. As the battle raged, the Visigothic king Theodoric was struck down. Enraged, his warriors charged with renewed fury, smashing into Attila's flank. The mighty Hun army, thought to be invincible, began to waver. Despite the chaos, Attila refused to retreat, rallying his warriors for a final stand. He built a massive defensive camp, daring the Romans and Visigoths to attack. But Aetius, ever the strategist, saw no need to risk further losses. He let Attila wither and starve behind his own defenses. With the Huns retreating, the Roman world had won a reprieve, but the empire's fate was still uncertain. The alliance between Rome and the Visigoths began to strain. There was no longer a common enemy to unite them. Aetius knew that peace in Rome was often just another battlefield. Attila returned a year later, invading Italy itself, devastating cities and marching toward Rome. This time, Aetius had fewer allies to call upon, and his army was too weak for direct confrontation. But fate intervened when Pope Leo I met Attila and convinced him to turn back, though whether it was diplomacy or Attila's own exhaustion remains a mystery. Aetius had saved the empire once again, but Rome was a city of political vultures. Corrupt officials, fearful of his power, whispered that he was becoming too strong. Even Emperor Valentinian III grew uneasy, wondering if Aetius would claim the throne for himself. The emperor's paranoia reached its peak as his advisors fed him lies about Aetius's supposed ambitions. They claimed that the general had too much power, that he could overthrow the throne at any moment. The emperor, once reliant on Aetius, now saw him as a threat. In 454 AD, Aetius was summoned to the imperial court under the guise of discussing the empire's future. He entered the palace unaware that he was walking into a death trap. His enemies were waiting in the shadows. As Aetius discussed military plans, Valentinian suddenly drew his sword and stabbed him. The emperor's men joined in, cutting down the man who had saved Rome. In mere moments, Flavius Aetius, the last of the Romans, lay dead on the palace floor. Aetius's death did not bring peace to Valentinian. It brought chaos. One of his officers coldly told him, "You have cut off your right hand with your left." Without Aetius, Rome had lost its last great defender. The empire, already fragile, now had no one left to stop its enemies. A year after Aetius's death, Valentinian was assassinated by his own guards. Rome had killed its last warrior and sealed its own doom. With Aetius gone, Rome's enemies sensed weakness and pressed harder against its borders. The Vandals, the Ostrogoths, and the Franks all prepared for war. Rome was now a city without a protector. Just 1 year after Aetius's death, the Vandals invaded Rome, looting the city without resistance. The mighty capital, once the heart of the world, had become a shadow of its former self. It was a grim reminder of what Aetius had fought to prevent. Though the empire crumbled, Aetius's tactics lived on. His ability to unite former enemies, manipulate politics, and command on the battlefield influenced future leaders. Even centuries later, his strategies were studied by warriors across Europe. Aetius was called the last of the Romans because he was the final general who fought to uphold the empire's traditions. After him, Rome's armies fell into decline, and no one could stop its fall. His name became a legend, a symbol of what Rome had lost. Flavius Aetius had saved Rome not just once, but many times. He stood against civil wars, barbarians, and betrayal, but in the end, he could not stop Rome from destroying itself. And though the empire faded, Aetius's name still echoes through history as the last great defender of Rome. Our journey through time comes to an end for today. We embark on new adventures every week. If you relish the experience, please like and subscribe.